the 3 in your head and go.
Welcome everyone to today's Kubernetes Office Hours, where we answer your user questions live on the air with our esteemed panel of experts. You can find us in Office Hours on Slack and check the topic for the URL for the information. Before we start, let's introduce ourselves. We'll go around the horn. Who wants to go first? Don't be bashful.
I'll go first. Yes, I am Mario Loria. I currently work at a company called Carta. I previously worked at StockX, building out the Kubernetes infrastructure, bringing cloud native, and really defining our cloud strategy. So excited to talk to all of you fine people today. Bring your questions. We are ready.
I'm Chancey Thorne, a certified. I'm Chancey Thorne, a certified Kubernetes application developer and administrator. Just here to try to answer as many questions as possible. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yogi. I'm from VMware, and this is actually my first office hours for any product. So happy to be here.
Hey everyone. My name is Rich Lander. This is my first time doing Kubernetes office hours, so I'm glad to be here. I currently work at VMware as a platform field engineer. Previously worked at Heptio and CoreOS as a field engineer, primarily helping enterprises adopt Kubernetes and cloud native.
And hey everyone. You actually wrote a book on maintaining Kubernetes, so awesome. Thank you so much for joining us and for the first time as well.
Yeah, pleased to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Leakin. I'm also at VMware. I'm a solutions architect over there, now focused on app modernization onto Kubernetes platforms or other cloud native platforms. I'm also used to work with Rich, so I'm glad that he's here. He taught me everything I know.
Hi everyone, Archie's here from Canada. It's my second time. Welcome to Yogi and Rich for their first Kubernetes office hours. I'm working at Google, and I'm a custom engineer, but I'm also spending a lot of time helping community bring Kubernetes. I'm organizing meetups in Canada, so I'm CNCF ambassador over here. Happy to be here again and share the knowledge with community.
Hey, I'm David Mackay, coming in from Scotland. I work at Equinix Metal, doing bare metal Kubernetes things. Happy to be here.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
I'm Borco, coming in from Canada as well. First time participating here. Learning along with everybody else and hoping to help out others.
And my name is Dan Papandrea. I'm from Sysdig. I'm the Director of Open Source and Community and Ecosystem for Sysdig, and I work on the Falco project, which recently is now PR'd as for adoption, or excuse me, as a graduating project within the CNCF. So moving forward, let's talk about the ground rules. The ground rules are, this is a Kubernetes event, so we follow the code of conduct. It's in effect. Please be excellent to one another. This is a judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere, so please help out your buddy being supportive in the channel, which, by the way, we have this Slack channel, office hours, if you have any questions, so feel free to add your questions there. While we do our best to answer your questions, the panel doesn't have access to your cluster to be able to do live debugging. There's a show called Clustered where Rocco does if you want to see some live debugging. So please, we will do our best to kind of get this moving forward. Normally we provide t-shirts, however, the CNCF store is replenishing its inventory. We will give a shout out and just undying devotion and appreciation. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on answers with your experience and pro tips. Audience, you can help by pasting in URLs to official docs or anything that may be relevant to the topic in it. We want this to be interactive, so please do so. You can also post your questions on discuss.kubernetes.io. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, or paying it forward. Again, we totally appreciate, we have some new volunteers this week, but it's made entirely of volunteers. If this panel, if you want to rotate in, please let us know. We love to have folks rotate in and out. Chauncey's a great example. Rich, Yogi, this is a great, having everybody join this is I believe what makes this community amazing is everybody, contributing as we do. So it's awesome. So without further ado, let's see, we have the first question. Question is, I want to change the MTUs by pods Following configure MTU to maximize network performance, I am able to do that by changing the veth m_MTU. However, I found that the VXLAN Calico interface on the bare metal machine that hosts the pod is still 1410, which hurts performance. I also tried to edit the MTU field using kubectl edit cm calico-config-n kubesystem, but to no avail. Any suggestions?
Don't change MTUs.
The first thing that comes to mind to me is when you're editing that config map, are you sure that that altered configuration is being picked up? I think it's Calico node is going to need to pick up that config and then change it on the node, change that interface. And the other thing I'm wondering about is, have you seen anything useful out of the logs on Calico node that may provide a clue as to why it's not updating that value? Those are the two thoughts that come to mind for me.
Yeah, hitting it hard. I love it, Rich. Making an impact already. Sorry, Chauncey, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, in the reference to the config map, if you make an edit to that, it takes a time for the pod to refresh it. So maybe restarting the stateful set or the daemon set might solve that particular problem there, or at least help it be reread.
Yeah, I'll just echo
be
that.
Very patient.
Yeah, I've seen this before as well. Not with Calico, but with Cilium, and that you do have to roll out those pods in order to get the changes. They usually don't pick them up live.
Alrighty, so as we're waiting for questions, let's talk about the latest release that come out. I believe it's 1.22. Am I accurate on that one? No, 1.21.
121.
121.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going ahead of the time. Sorry, just going to whatever. I'm so excited about 1.21. I just skipped it. I was like, this is too awesome. Anybody have any thoughts on the new release? What they like to see? What were the cool things that they saw in the release notes?
Yeah, so I think Graceful Mode shutdown, it actually went GA, I think. I could be wrong on that. This is huge. I remember running clusters back in the day and nodes would come and go, which is expected behavioral. And having those pods kind of not gracefully be shut down can really hurt the overall capacity and performance and really the customer experience, right, of people that are tapping into our platform. I think that's a huge feature. I think this just shows us that we are continuing to focus on optimizations that are making Kubernetes even better, more reliable, more resilient, and the number one choice for most cloud native microservice based environments, and hopefully in the future serverless as well. So that's a really exciting feature to see. Lots of other great stuff though, and I think Sysdig did a great breakdown of what's new with 1.21 above and beyond even the normal or the de facto blog post. I very much urge people to check that out. I'll link it right now in the Slack.
And thank you, Mario. Yeah, I was just going to mention the deprecation, Chauncey. Go ahead and take that one, but I have some backstory on that one as well.
Yeah, pod security policy you're referring to, that being deprecated? Yep, that's a good thing. Well, I think it's a good thing because it brings OPA and Gatekeeper and Kverna to the forefront as solutions to that specific problem, et cetera.
I think, again, what I like about this is the Kubernetes 6 security team, Tabby Sable, really coming to the forefront in terms of how she was, I'm part of Kubernetes 6 security, and basically that was a Herculean task. There's a lot of things that had to take into consideration for pod security policy. So being able to take, feedback from the community and the way that they did it. And there's a link I'm going to put in the channel as well about, past, present, and future. So people are scared because, it doesn't mean that it's going away. It's more in embracing, policy management technologies like OPA, like Kverna, those types of things. So I think it's very, very cool. So shout out to you, Tabby and team. Any other? There's a question in the channel, you all. This is, how do I configure Kubernetes to release, evacuate PV and PVC once pod has been faulted, error, terminated for X amount of time? The problem I'm having is when a worker crashes the pod, will go down and redeploy after 30 seconds to another worker. Pod eviction timeout equals 30 seconds, but the PVC will not move until the dead worker is back online. Any storage gurus on our Steam panel want to just nail this one?
it would be interesting to know where he's running his Kubernetes cluster. Is it cloud provider or on-prem? Because that behavior might be a little bit different depending on where they're.
It does sound like it might be an infrastructure integration issue, huh?
I would wonder what the CSI provider is there also to see if there is any specific ones that are of.
They are
of
saying
note,
that
but,
it's on-prem Ubuntu Dell servers.
Yeah,
Matt
because this
said
problem will not happen probably in the cloud provider, where the it's going to be controlled by backed cloud storage.
Cloud provider controller.
Yeah, so as soon as your node goes down and the pod will start on a different node, the PVC, the volume will follow the pod, or actually the opposite. The volume will be first connected to the node, and then the pod will start. So that problem shouldn't happen maybe on the cloud provider side, but on-prem, that could be maybe some configurations that you've made. So it needs some more information probably to give you an accurate answer.
Could it be because of the CSI driver as well? Tuning in CSI driver? Because like if you're using say vSphere CSI driver and your like actual storage is a data store or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like we need to understand what the storage looks like. How is storage been attached? That's a key factor there. Is it using some sort of external provisioner or something?
I was going to suggest the same thing. I don't know if they're using something like Kubester or something like Portworx or something like that. So if it's iSCSI, that's the other part of this is, there's a lot of things that could, that could be LUN issues that are attributed to this. This could be a litany of different issues, right? Versus having some type of CSI provider kind of in the middle of this to be able to like also help with Divi through that, I think would probably help adjust this. But this is where, taking a look at the, your storage paradigms and making sure that like, they're at a place where either like at a place where like something can be tuned as the panel has discussed, that's really hard one for us to kind of debug live, I think.
I'll jump in with another suggestion. I'm not sure, it's not clear from the question if this is a deployment or a stateful set. But if it's a deployment, consider perhaps using a stateful set because it will have the same PVC associated with the pods. So that may help resolving some issues.
Alrighty, I think we're going to move on to the next question. And Matt, definitely love to go more deeply on that one at some point. But all right, so how do I migrate one service at a time? This is from Yogs. I'm running Rancher and want to migrate one service at a time on EKS. Do I need this to do some sort of ALB? So I have service XYZ and want to forward traffic to EKS service-XYZ.
So having been down this path several times in the past, the short answer is yes. Think of it like a global service load balancer that all traffic comes through. And when it hits that, you can configure it to send traffic to one cluster or another. That is a solution that'll work well in most cases. The other thing you'll have to consider if this is in play is any persistent storage. That can be the trickiest part to migrate over when you're live migrating services from one cluster to another. The ALB sounds like the application load balancer in AWS, but I'm not sure if that's what you mean. But some global traffic routing proxy that you can run traffic through will usually do the trick, at least for that purpose. Could be as simple as an Nginx server.
Yeah, I just want to mention too, like it's definitely possible to do this in DNS as well, right? If you had two different load balancers going to your Rancher and your new EKS system, you could actually put both of those load balancers as responses in the DNS queries for your application. However, I really agree with Rich. I think you should let the load balancer be the core manager of that, and you have full control over what that's doing. So I would definitely go that route first. I've been at companies that have had a layer outside, even closer to the edge of Cloudflare in front of everything coming in, right? Managing those domains, and Cloudflare and many other CDN type load balancers, DDoS mitigation providers provide tooling for doing this sort of thing, including weighting based on how you want to do it, geolocation, other great features. So definitely consider those as well.
I would propose a more complex solution, but fun to probably work on it. You can also set up like service mesh like Istio, and be configured in a way that it will span your, like in a hybrid mode, where your part will be running on Rancher and another part on EKS, and you'll be able to gradually shift the traffic on the EKS side. That, of course, will require some learning curve on your side, learning Istios and how to configure it. But I think, as gentleman mentions, and I think in this case, if you have stateless pods, you can actually just redeploy it on your EKS side, and then whatever you have stateful, you potentially can cut over on the EKS side where you have like stateless right away, and run it there, and then think about maybe at the time where it's slow, maybe low traffic, you can maybe just dump your database and restore it on the EKS side, and then switch traffic. So maybe in the slow time of the, like maybe at nighttime when this low traffic, that could be an easy path to go without re-engineering things just for migration. That's the beauty of Kubernetes, is a lot of things are stateless, so you can just redeploy it and start it on the other end.
Yeah, I followed that question with any... Oh, I'm sorry, Yogi, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was actually kind of going to the Istio thing. I ran into this problem where we were actually migrating from one Kubernetes cluster to another. And yeah, I mean, the assumption was that all these services are exposed by a load balancer, but there were, like, we had 15 services and 3 of them were kind of internal services. So that was the part that was actually missed initially and then came in much later. So do know your dependencies. So if you have any internal services where you're actually using the internal DNS routes, make sure that they actually get moved along with their dependent services. Otherwise, you'll have to go crisscross between clusters or use an Istio-like solution.
All right, the follow-up question is there any docs available? So if there's anything we can kind of give pointers over to Yogs, that'd be great. Just give them a breadcrumb trail to Yogs, so then that the person knows where to go. All righty, so next question is from Kishaba. This is a long question, so in terms of he's putting in the debug, so you all can see in the channel, but I'll kind of try to paraphrase if that's okay. So Kishaba has been using K3S air gap version 1.17.2 and using default ingress and using his own certs. Now I've updated the certificate secret. It's not picking up the new certificate secret, but still serving the old one. I also confirmed that my application pods are picking up new certificates. Can anyone help me here or let me know more information required? So you all can kind of see the logs. Again, I want to preface that, this is definitely something that if we had the ability to live debug, it'd probably be a little bit easier, right? So this isn't clustered. Shout out, Rocco.
Yeah, that's why I come on the office hours, to get all these ideas from broken clusters and then put them on the show.
There you go, research.
Does anyone get any ideas?
My immediate sort of go-to thing with this one is, have you tried turning it off and on?
Have you tried restarting, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we changed a secret, I mean, there's a possibility that the pods actually don't get bounced and the certificates actually don't get picked up, the controller pods. So probably that would be the first thing I would look at if I'm not seeing those.
I mean, there's also things like Let's Encrypt, I think, and also like, isn't there other like ways that you could kind of have something else manage certs versus doing it like from a manual cert perspective? That's something I would,
Cert
Cert Manager.
Cert Manager always.
Yep.
Because Let's Encrypt won't be an option because it's an air gap cluster, but running Cert Manager in the cluster with a local issuer would definitely maybe help make this a little bit easier and remove some of that toil for sure.
Do we want to maybe give a link to just some helpful stuff on Cert Manager for Kishaba?
Coming up.
I did notice in the traffic logs there that traffic has acknowledged that there is a new certificate, in that it's recognized that the secret has changed, but it explicitly says skipping addition of certificate for that particular domain as it already exists. At that point, I'd be a little bit upset with traffic and I'd bounce a traffic pod. I don't know if that would do the trick, but it'd be worth a try.
Rich, I want to adopt you. I want to adopt you. You're like the best, dude. I'm going like this, man. Good job, WikiLeakins, bringing Rich to the mix here. I love this.
One who wrote the production Kubernetes book, really?
Yeah.
There could be a good reason that traffic is saying, I don't want to switch this certificate out. For example, if the new certificate, no, I take that back. I was going to say maybe traffic has recognized a problem with the new certificate, but it's not explicitly saying that in the log. So I can't think of a reason why it would not want to change it.
Did you all get the follow-on info from Kashaba?
I may not have scrolled down far enough.
Yes, I made replicas 0 and 1. I also deleted the ingress and secret, and they created newly.
Yeah, I was thinking about actually patching or updating the ingress, but yeah, if that did not work, I will have to probably see the traffic logs.
Alrighty, and then we see that raw code put the cert manager details in there, and also Kashaba just added, I bounced the traffic deployment. All right. Do we want to take another stab at that one, or do you want me to move on to the next question, y'all? Alrighty.
Yeah, I think we'll come back to that one.
Moving forward. Yep. And again, Archie, awesome. Thanks for giving that really awesome answer with a couple of options for Valero and the stateless aspects, and awesome. Thank you, Archie. Next one is from Mohit Patil. Can we have multi-factor authentication in between any of the KDS authentication plugins, OIDC, X509, webhook, etc.?
Is that for authorization portion for like when you're trying to get into the Kubernetes API? So you might have a multi-factor authentication, or it's more for the workloads? Probably would be good to clarify, I think, because we have authentication and for application authentication for Kubernetes API and maybe some other things. So it would be good to clarify exactly where he wants to have MFA configured.
Mohit, do you want to kind of, oh, looks like he's typing, so that's good. We're getting a direct response there. And thanks everyone, by the way, joining the channel, adding questions. We really love this. The panel is primed and ready for you. Chauncey's already chomping at the bit to go to the next one right here, so it's good.
Yeah, these are tough questions today, that's for sure.
Yep.
All right, shall we come back to that MFA question once we get a bit more detail? Yeah.
Yep. All right, so I've been running Windows workloads in my Kubernetes cluster as Windows Docker images. Huge pod starting time is high. I've been thinking of creating custom images for my Windows worker nodes and bake my base Docker images in there. Is there any other suggestion to overcome this? Before we get started there, can I ask the question is, how large are these images?
A couple of gigs usually.
Yeah, in terms of, I'd definitely like to see that, so.
That's a very actually.
It looks like Yogi's on top of that one.
Yeah, I think it was there was a similar one, right? It was for the ML use case where the images are huge, and somebody mentioned that we could actually use the cache warmer through a daemon set. So baking into the image, probably not. That would mean that if you need to overwrite it, it'll be. You'll probably have to repave the worker.
Yeah, in the worker VM image sounds extreme. Pre-pulling those images onto the nodes ahead of time before they're going to be needed, I think would be the optimum solution.
Another option would be,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, another option would be that if the contents of the image can be put on a persistent volume claim or something, and you just use that pod to mount that persistent volume, that would allow you to do it. Now, the quirk in that particular context is if you get a read-write only, that means it's only one pod, so you need to get that read-write many so that multiple pods can attach to that volume and use that data, etc. So that might be an option.
Yeah, and probably make a research in terms of like what's the most optimal base image that has the smallest footprint. Unfortunately, I haven't looked at this for a while on the Windows side, but if anyone's running Windows workloads, maybe if you can share in the Slack channel what base images that you recommend, maybe in this case, so at least your initial image size will be smaller. Obviously, moving to .NET Core would help a lot, because then you can running on the smaller images, Linux-based images. But if you really like have a use case for the Windows .NET, maybe, and Windows Kubernetes nodes, it's pretty common issue, I would say, with the large images.
All right, I think we're going to go back to the MFA question, because Mohit responded back to considering, so basically added considering Kubernetes Dashboard only for now. So it looks like MFA for the Kubernetes Dashboard.
So just thinking this through, this sounds like it's not authentication directly to the Kubernetes API. Is everyone else thinking of it that way? In which case, I think you could use any custom method you wanted. Am I thinking about this back to front?
I was thinking the same thing, where there would be a front end thing like an Nginx or something like that. That would be the header for the MFA, and then trying to funnel to like, the dashboard or something else. Like what if your applications not only have it from the dashboard perspective? What if you want to expand beyond the dashboard? Maybe you want like an ingress for whatever it might be, right? You'd probably want to front load it with something. So yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah, and generally, there was a lot of conversation in terms of like how Kubernetes Dashboard maybe not the safest solution sometimes. So obviously, if you're running on a cloud provider, or if you're running maybe some platform, they usually tackle this problem by adding their like safe Kubernetes Dashboard. I'm sure there are a lot of projects that like provide better experience as well with Kubernetes. I remember we covered a few examples of the open source Kubernetes dashboards that are can be available as well. But like, yeah, running Kubernetes dashboard sometimes could be security risk, and I guess that's why he's trying to configure MFA. And
I mean, even beyond the dashboards, was there not a feature added recently to kubectl that allows the credentials helper? Could that intercept and do MFA before giving them a kubeconfig? Would that be another route?
Yeah, in this case, it looks like it's like any front end, right? So in this case, the front end is running Kubernetes dashboard, but you can run pretty much any other application. One solution recently has been added to, I think, Istio 1.9. They have external authenticator integration right now, so you can potentially connect to your MFA provider. So like this external authentication mechanism with Istio is kind of simplifies. Previously it was kind of baked in, now it's like more separated, so it's supposed to be easier. So have a look as well on Istio external authenticators at 1.9. So you can configure it with Istio gateway external authentication.
One other route I would suggest is running Teleport in your cluster and having your Kubernetes dashboard only available internally, and then Teleport actually does MFA against GitHub, OIDC, Google, etc. And then that could expose your Kubernetes dashboard to people logged in through that proxy. So that might be a good approach.
Awesome. All right, I think we're going to move forward on the next question. You all, the panel is attacking the questions. I've been looking at it, and the replies are going up. So awesome. So the question here is from Tyson Moyes. I'm sorry if I got your name incorrect. Hi all, I've been working on RBAC in a cluster. I've been trying to create a cluster role that has full access to the entire cluster except for the kube system's namespace. From what I found, cluster roles cannot exclude namespaces. My theory right now is I would have to use OPA to enforce this type of policy. Curious if there's any other ideas in the community. And I also see Borko. Hi, hey Borko. It looks like Borko has also responded there. Borko, you want to try to, kind of work through the questions with him there live?
Well, I was just trying to figure out whether the cluster role that he's looking for needs access to cluster level resources, or if he's just trying to say, I need some role that has access to all of the namespaces, but not kube system. Because there could be different solutions depending on which one he's exactly looking for. Generally, I think if you just want access to like a bunch of namespaces, but you don't want access to cluster level resources, you probably don't want to be using cluster roles from a security point of view. So in that way, you kind of want to automate creating perhaps roles in namespaces you want access for. If you want cluster role that doesn't have access to certain namespaces or resources, I guess you'd have to create some sort of custom cluster role. I'm trying to think that one through. But that, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer yet.
I'm going to somewhat shameless plug and say, look, once you do figure out the roles and all of that, you can also use Falco from an audit logs perspective and see who's actually been creating namespaces, because we tap into the audit log capability there to see if they've created a namespace, they showed an outside of kube system and all of that. But, I think looks like Chauncey, you chimed in there as well.
Yes, one pattern would be to apply a role to a namespace similar to what the Kubernetes project does. If you look at that namespace user role that I just pasted into the Slack, they provide a role based on a namespace. So you could have maybe an operator that applied that role to each of your namespaces or specific namespaces with, an annotation or a label or something on it, and they can help you control access to your infrastructure.
Yeah, I just want to add to you and answer Chansey. There is a new project in Kubernetes community called Hierarchical Namespaces that potentially can simplify this in your, like, if you have a complex enterprise environment, maybe where you have many different teams, and then with hierarchical namespaces, you can actually create this more elegantly, and it will propagate down your RBAC configuration to your team, for example. So could be a place to look as well if it's going to solve your use case. I'm going to paste the link into the chat Slack channel.
All right, if there's anybody else want to chime in on that one, or can we move on to the next?
I actually just wanted to talk through the idea that Tyson floated there about using OPA to enforce this sort of policy, and I was thinking through how that might work. And it sounds like this role is kind of a cluster admin light, whereby they have full access to the cluster, but read only to kube system. And I can think of a way that might work using OPA. If you used another role, if you made a new role that had everything that cluster admin has, all the permissions, but then use a validating policy in OPA to say, if it's that role, don't allow any changes to kube system. That conceivably would work. So that could be a workaround in lieu of something more elegant.
All righty. Moving forward on the next question. How do I access EKS cluster in the CI/CD pipeline without having to use kubeconfig file? Look, this is the question is getting tagged by the panel. So I don't know who wants to take that one first. It looks like Mario, Chauncey. Take whoever wants it. Who wants it first?
Yeah, I think really quick, I mean, you need something to authenticate to the cluster. I mean, maybe it's not the kubeconfig, maybe there's other things there and you're using other plugins or something like that. But I think this person is just trying to kind of figure out in their head, if I have an EKS cluster, how do I get what I need to be able to contact that EKS cluster from other tooling, right? And I think that's maybe a little bit tricky at first. I know tools like EKSCTL and obviously the AWS command, and there's documentation for this as well as how to get a kubeconfig that should work. So in this case, it's this person's doing it from their CI/CD pipeline, so it's some sort of environment that needs to contact Kubernetes, probably for a CD or something like that. So I think we're kind of sharing some guides here of how they can do that and understand how the impact of IAM as it relates to accessing your cluster. So I think that's just what this is. So I would consider this one probably potentially pretty close to solved. And yeah, EKS can be a little bit hard to understand at first, that relationship and how that works in other environments versus just like something on your laptop. But hopefully this helps, and Yogs can move forward and get that pipeline dialed in.
One thing I'll add here is a big shout out to James Strong in here. He wrote he wrote some really good training from the AWS side, and shout out to you, James Strong. Thanks for jumping in the channel and answering. Maybe you should be on the panel someday, bud. Anyway, there's another question. Should we move on to this? Unless Chauncey, you want to add any comments to this one, or are you good?
We're just trying to clarify, is the desire to like not distribute a kube config, or is it trying to limit it? Because if you want to interact with your cluster in a CI/CD pipeline without necessarily having a kube config that exposes it, the GitHub pattern is like the perfect solution for that, where if you have a image that's built from your CI/CD pipeline, like Flux, and a later version of Argo CD can detect that image change and pull it into your cluster and then update your repo. So that's a pattern that you could follow that completely removes anybody from needing to interact with your cluster using kube control, et cetera. You can actually have it on a private internal network, just as long as Flux or Argo can reach out to your GitHub or your GitLab, wherever.
That's an elegant solution, Chelsea.
Very, very elegant. Alrighty, next question, another question. Yogs is on fire today with a bunch of questions for us. Would you suggest deploying cadence resources in default namespaces, or create one and deploy there? I have an opinion, but I want the panel to speak first.
Not in production. Be deliberate about your namespaces.
The man who,
I think OPA has
the man who wrote the book
yeah.
right there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Doesn't OPA have a rule that prevents deploying to default namespace? It's like an example that they have out there. So this seems to like be the indication that you don't put anything there. Because if you accidentally deploy a cluster role and apply it to like the service account, every pod that you create in that particular default now has, cluster capabilities or cluster admin capabilities. So you want to be careful.
I think it really depends also on your company structure, how you wanna, tackle this problem. I would say, like, some companies have the operations team, or I don't know, DevOps, or how you may call it in your team. They will be like more focused on the Kubernetes cluster configuration and policy deployment. So they will kind of prepare your environment for deployment. And here you can actually also use hierarchical namespaces that the operation teams will actually prepare for you, and then you can actually create your own namespaces that has already specific RBAC and policy applied on them, and you can have a less strict environment to deploy your stuff. So it's really, I think, depends on how your team operates, and like if you're alone, then you can do whatever you want. If you have different teams that are responsible for different things, and then you might need to look into GitOps for something. Configuration and policy management maybe could be a different team. So it's a very complex question, and it really needs to down to your use case, and probably have a discussion and understanding what is your environment and what you're trying to tackle there. But there are many options.
Good.
So I think overall, though, regardless if it's the operator creating the namespace for your team or you're doing it, I think the sentiment is just don't use, or if you don't have to, create your own, right? Don't use default. Okay, I think either way, you're still not going to get default. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
No, I've got.
Oh, you didn't have anything? Okay. Really quick. I don't think there's shame in using the default namespace. A couple companies ago, like, we use the default namespace. We're getting into Kubernetes. At the end of the day, we need our applications to run. We need them to service other applications. We need them to service customers, incoming requests. It's more or less just the organization, the teams, the service owners and the kind of the architecture of what you want to do. Sometimes when you're in innovation startup mode, you don't have time to think about problems like what namespace things are going in, policies, other things like that. You just need a place where your applications can run and they can run reliably. And you knowing that Kubernetes can do that, you just have to move forward. So it's not like, oh, we're running in the default namespace. This is a #1 priority. We should absolutely stop everything we're doing and break things out. I do think when you do get bigger, when you start to incur massive growth, when you start to have lines of separation, boundaries of ownership, you need to start thinking about how you're going to do this. I think hierarchical namespaces really helps make that easier. I think the tools like Service Mesh, CNIs help you implement network policies and then set up things, quotas per namespace, and you can really start to build out when you start to focus on security a little bit more. When you get to that phase, the tooling is there, and you should very much talk to people like us and get an idea of what you should do. But there is no shame in launching a new Kubernetes cluster and moving forward. But there are things you should definitely think about. So.
Just totally follow up on that.
Definitely agree for a sandbox and a development instance. I totally agree with you. But for production, again, putting the security hat that I have on it from not only just runtime security, but all of the rest of it, I absolutely believe namespaces should be attributed. Also, thinking back to what just happened in the releases in terms of PSP deprecation, but PSPs in general, whatever the replacement is, how are you going to apply these things to just the default namespace? Where what I mean, like that to me is asinine. So as Mario said, as you start going into more of the production level services and having to segregate and ensure your environments are compliant from a certain degree, you cannot do it on a single namespace. It just goes against any security paradigm that's out there. So
can I come at this from a different angle? Like what I've heard here is mostly around multi-tenancy within a Kubernetes cluster. Is there anything special about the default namespace, or any other technical considerations for why a single team wouldn't just deploy the default? Or is multi-tenant? Sorry, you go.
In almost every use case I've seen, when a namespace is provisioned for a cluster tenant, there are other resources that go along with it, like roles, resource quotas, things like that. And there's no technical reason why you couldn't apply that to the default namespace, but it also is being more deliberate about it and creating a namespace for a thing is a little more explicit and descriptive. And as teams develop in their sophistication of managing these things, it makes sense.
Awesome.
Alrighty, so we're going to move forward.
Another point I just want to add on that was this is something I saw with one of the customers. They are actually using multiple Kubernetes clusters, and they're not deploying all the applications on a single cluster. In some cases, they have multiple applications running on a single cluster, but they are kind of maintaining globally unique namespaces. So for example, an application deployed on one cluster uses that namespace. If it were to actually get moved to another cluster, they would continue to use that same namespace. So for that application, the namespace remains same across any cluster. And also, when they actually move from lower environments, development, UAT, and production, the namespaces sort of go along. So for anything, I guess, running in production, even like for me, I always say development is production. If it is your own sandbox, go ahead, I can use default namespaces, but when you want that kind of standardization, it's always good to have namespaces for your application.
Alrighty, it looks like we're light on questions, so maybe we can go back to, in terms of the release notes for 1.21, anything you all are excited to talk about, or you know what, let's also open up to the space. Is there anything in Kubernetes now, like KubeCon wise, KubeCon's coming in a couple of weeks, that you all are excited about?
I just want to say, we got EU coming early May, and it's virtual, which is not going to be the funnest thing in the world. But I have a talk that I'm really excited about that everyone has pre-recorded their talks, and myself and my co-presenter will be there for answering questions and things like that. But I do want to say I logged in recently to edit my my registration, and there are tons of day zero events, like tons. Like if there isn't something there that moderately interests you, I don't know what universe you come from, because there's so many cool things going on, a lot of which are free, which I did not know. So please go jump in your registration. If you haven't registered, go and check it out. There's also free content like the keynotes and other things. Please go and check it out. Get your company to pay for it. They absolutely should. I think virtual will definitely be awesome to see. There will be some amazing talks. There's still a lot going on, and tune in. I know North America is coming up in October. Plan to be in LA, and I will be there physically with one or more masks on. It's going to be a really good time. I'm looking forward to partying with all these fellow awesome people and all of you that are tuned in right now. So
socially distantly. Socially,
right? Yes, exactly. Yeah, maybe even a face shield. Just go all out. It's going to be fun though. I just think it's going to be so great to see people see everybody in person, and I'm really looking forward to it. So stay tuned.
So before we get to North America, in terms of EMEA, definitely looking forward to seeing a lot of sessions there. As Mario said, the 0 days are great. Also, shameless plug, we're doing a KubeCon end of the day kind of wrap up recap as well. That would be really cool if you all want to take a look at that. That's pretty much it on that. Anybody have any other thoughts in terms of just, again, release things, anything in our Kubernetes community that you'd love to kind of give a shout out to?
I'd like to give a shout out to a book that was released in March of 2021, Production Kubernetes. It's a very informative book. I recommend people read it and learn.
Thanks.
We have an Amazon link, so like, Rich could get paid on this or something. is that something we could do, George? I'm sorry. Yeah, gotta keep the lights on, I guess. Awesome. Let's see. Looks like some questions are coming in here. Is there anything? Oh, no, you got this. Go. All right. Oh, this is a good one here from Ohit. This might be, listen, that is a very relevant question, because guess what? Everybody on this panel was in the same place you were in terms of trying to contribute to. We love when people come in. We want to nurture that. We want to mentor you. We want you to come in and feel involved with this amazing community. So the question is, I love Kate's. Well, we love you, and want to contribute in KS repo. How should I start? Who wants to handle this one, or give some links and handle it?
I recommend join one of the mini SIGs and then start hanging out with them, and then start looking for, pull issues that are for good first-time issues for people, and start there. But, you don't have to code also to be a part of this project. You can, join office hours. You can join Contributors X. There's a lot of things to contribute to the project without actually writing a line of code.
Yeah, I was just to go off of that, Chauncey. I kind of just lurked, right? When I joined, when I met like Rich and Stephen Augustus, and they were kind of like walking me through of how to get involved, I kind of just watched for like a couple of months. I think it was a really long time. And then, like I said, watching the SIG, seeing what's going on. And then eventually you'll see an issue. You're like, hey, I think I can do this. And like you said, Chauncey, it doesn't have to be code. It could be like, hey, can you update this document, right? You could start there. And eventually you start getting into the flow of things. So I suggest find whatever your strength is. If it's not coding, right, you could go that route. If it is coding, just lurk and see if any issues pop up. Or if it's like joining meetings, you'll see what little things people need help with as well.
Yeah, I'd also recommend SIG contributor experience. If you don't know which SIG or which aspect of Kubernetes you want to get involved with up front, then get in and join the contributor experience. I think it's bi-weekly mentoring meetings where you can go along and actually meet mentors who can help guide you on your journey as well. So that's a really good way to get started.
Also, I guess if you're going to KubeCon, you can sign up for, I think, meet the maintainer, like for one of the projects, or I'm sure there'll be stuff in there as well.
That's one thing we always talk about this, but I say it all the time. Like, anybody in the community has been so warm and welcoming. We want to make sure that everybody's involved in this, that like they feel that because all of us were in the same boat here, learning Kubernetes, trying to contribute, trying to be part of this, and everybody else helps foster us going forward. So we'd love to see that, Mohit, and we love the fact that you're wanting to get involved. All right, Borko responded here. This looks interesting to me. Do you want to talk about the secret logging static analysis?
I was just browsing around, looked interesting. I think it's going to beta this release. It's essentially a feature that prevents logging of sensitive information and secrets to logs, so that if you're collecting logs, then you don't get sensitive information and passwords and things like that in your logs. So I think that's a pretty cool thing, because a lot of enterprises will have policies against having sensitive information in logs.
It's such an easy mistake to make. Anything that helps prevent that is solid gold.
Alrighty, and alumni, Chris Carty really put to the office hours. I'm put a link to the release team. There's a link there as well. That's definitely a place for going back to. We kind of skipped over this, but going back to Mohit's question in terms of how to get involved. Archie put the Kubernetes podcast. Awesome. I totally agree. Navarone was incredible on that. Navarone is one of the release leads, and I think this release was the first one that was, I think, by somebody internationally versus in domestic in the US for this release, which I thought was incredible. This shows the worldwide community coming together and putting out a release. Again, do you know of any other project, open source or any, that has this level of kind of, just international, like everybody kind of global kind of presence? I think that's just phenomenal. Cool.
I probably want to share the excitement that Kubernetes 1.21 release added support for IPv4, IPv6 dual stack support. It's funny because this is always coming up. Every platform people building like OpenStack or IPv4, IPv6 always popping out as feature requests. But I think it's something coming in the right moment, because like a lot of telcos is building 5G networks, and they have million devices that needs to connect. And obviously Kubernetes is probably the best platform to run the applications at the moment. And having Kubernetes supporting IPv4, IPv6 will probably help also a lot of telcos move from infrastructure to more like Kubernetes native landscapes, cloud native. So I'm very excited about it.
Excellent. We're going on, I think, another 5 to 6 more minutes. Any kind of other thoughts we want to have besides we're waiting for some more questions here? Let me ask you all this. In terms of this release, and you folks have been through different releases and all the, how do you all, I'm going to ask this question, how do you all test new releases? What are you using? Kind? Are you using micro K8s? Are you using K3s? What are you all using? I'd love to understand that one if you're testing like a new release.
Outside of formal testing, I have one suggestion, which is release new releases of Kubernetes and all of the platform components that you're running on it into your development environments as soon as possible. Run the software that you'll be running in production in development on the new versions, and you'll organically start to see any issues come up. That's not a very structured, formal way of testing, but it's quite effective nonetheless.
Kind allows you to do that better. Kind allows you to check out the code, create a feature branch, modify your code, and then do a node build, and it will build a node image from that cluster, from that code that it's currently looking at, and you can test it in the cluster, et cetera. So use Kind for a lot of your testing, or just learning Kubernetes, et cetera. It's provision using kubeadm, which gives you insight into how that works, et cetera. So it's a very cool tool.
Yeah, I love Kind because of its kind of declarative model for how you want a format to be clustered, what you want your options are. Like, for instance, how many masters do you want? You can help test certain things, and it really just uses Docker on your machine, which you probably have already. So I want to keep in mind there's Minikube, there is the Kubernetes variant that Docker for Desktop provides. There's other ways to do this. You should figure out what fits best for you. There's also a new project, EKZ, that helps you run EKS on your laptop. So we're seeing this idea of how do I actually get the exact cloud provider environment that I'm running in a cloud, right? For my larger, bigger clusters, how do I get that similar environment locally? So it's becoming easier to do that and stay ahead with the latest versions of Kubernetes. So absolutely check those projects out. I'll put some links as well.
Alrighty, and looks like we have some links to Kind. Again, K3S is another one that's useful, microcates as well, to be able to kick the tires. But going back to what Rich said, I think again, I think you were saying at a macro level, right, versus on your personal lap, where if an organization wants to really get up to speed on a release, really like putting in your development environment and saying, look, this is the repercussions if something happens, be able to address those before putting them in production. I think it's just such a sound kind of concept of how to do deployment. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that a little bit, Kind is fantastic for local development when developers are putting together individual components, but where a lot of us are using more distributed service-oriented architecture, which means that oftentimes you will need a development cluster that teams share to deploy their components to, the integration testing and things like that. And that's kind of a remote development cluster is what I was driving at.
Completely makes sense. So George,
Yeah,
we got four minutes. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rachel, go ahead.
No, yeah, I actually have a question. If I wasn't on the call, I would have asked it. Speaking of like new releases and things like that, how do you all deal with your customers who are like maybe N-5 or 4 on some of these releases? How do you recommend that they keep up to date? Like for example, I've been so out of it that I didn't even know we were having a release today, right? So how do you keep them up to date on when the releases are coming out, and then what do you recommend to them when they are so far behind?
Can I take the first step at this? And again, putting the security hat on, you do not want to be 5 releases revisions back on anything from a security perspective of the components and also dependencies on, the underlying, architecture and all of that. So like, you see, there's misconfiguration of security costs the industry almost $5 trillion. And that's even a cloud provider, what have you. So if you're going back and saying, I'm resting on my laurels, going back 5 revisions back, there's tons of technology to keep you up to date. It's exactly the things that Rich is mentioning here. It's where, hey, you want to see the repercussions here, you do it in your dev instance of upgrading here. That just tells me that they're kind of don't have a paradigm for rolling up releases there. So that's kind of my security level opinion there on that.
This was also, I guess, not coincidentally, but related. This was the last release of the 4 releases per annum, I believe. We're now lowering the release cadence of the project to 3 releases per year, just to help tackle this problem where organizations don't have to have, don't have to be doing at least 1 major upgrade every year.
Yeah, I wanted to mention too, I think there's WG, the working group LTS as well for long-term support. There's been many discussions there. I actually don't know the status of that, so maybe someone can give an update. I think when you are a tiny DevOps team, maybe in a startup environment or a company that's just getting going, this is incredibly difficult. And this is why I think you should really leverage cloud providers and other tooling, which can help either automate that or make it so much easier to do. So I'll stop there. I know we're running out of time. I want to let other people speak.
Anyone else out on to end cap that?
Yeah, I would just like to piggyback on the word automate that Mario mentioned there. When folks fall behind, it's very often due to a lack of automation in those upgrade processes. And when they're manual, they're time consuming and it's difficult to find time to do them. So automate.
All righty, everyone. Rich, everyone in this panel, just stars. Thanks to the following companies for supporting the community with developer volunteers: VMware, Google, Carta, Sysdig, Equinix Metal. Anybody else I forgot? No, I think we got everybody. And also, lastly, feel free to hang out in the office hours channel afterwards. If there's other channels are too busy, or if the other channels are too busy for you, you're looking for a friendly home, you're more than welcome to pull up a chair and hang out. We're back at the same time next month. Until then, have a great one. We thank you so much for joining us and thank the panel again.
Bye, everyone.